Welcome back to another edition of the Wyo Business Spotlight. Jim, thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. This is exciting.
I thought we better get it started because we've been already talking for 5 minutes. We're going to run out of things to say. So tell us about the brewery. Tell us tell us how you realized, when you realized you're taking your passion to make it into something commercial, like a business out of your passion.
Like many breweries, our roots go back to homebrewing. I had a friend who homebrewed. We were avid brewery followers. We lived in Montana. Medicine River Brewing Company was right around the corner. I started buying my supplies from him. And, through the years, just making beer and working with other homebrewers and buying stuff from Madison River, it's just something that we grew in, Heidi and I both. And it just kind of came along where, we said this is something that we enjoy doing, and we think that Casper's got room for some growth in the brewery arena, and we started Stahoos.
So what's the story behind the name?
Stahoo is Polish for Stanley, and that's my grandpa on my mom's side. It's actually spelled Stahu, but we modified the spelling so people could have an easier time pronouncing it. So he was a moonshiner. He worked at Gray Iron Foundry in Saginaw, Michigan. He farmed. He was first-generation U.S. born. His parents both came from Poland. Farmed, raised chickens, and he was a big part of my life. And, we decided we were going to open a brewery, and we started looking at locations, and then we, started thinking about a name, and that just kind of came to me to honor him and the family tradition of farming and everything that he provided in my life.
That's great. So are you originally from Michigan?
Yes, originally from Michigan. Born in Bay City, grew up in the Petoskey, Charlevoix area, which I say is almost a Yooper. We were 50 miles from the bridge.
Oh, right. So why did you choose Casper? What about Casper stuck out to you? Like, this is the place you want to be?
So for over 30 years, I worked for different nonprofit organizations, ran them, raised money, was the executive director, chief development officer, did that sort of thing. That's what ultimately brought us to Casper. And then COVID came along, and we actually started planning the brewery in the fall of 2020 and started looking for locations, and then it just kind of grew to that process where we looked at leasing buildings, leasing space, saw that wasn't really a viable option, and for the long-term sustainability of Stahoos, we bought a building, did the renovations, and opened. We bought the building in February of 2022, and we opened in June of 2022. We turned it around in 4 months.
So you started in 2020. Is it just before COVID hit?
Right.
So is that when you bought the building and opened up?
We actually bought the building in 2021 and then opened in June of 2022.
Okay, so after COVID.
Right.
So post-COVID, which is better.
Yeah.
Better than starting in the middle of
Correct.
COVID. But at the same time, you were, when you started, you didn't know when this COVID thing was going to end. So that was probably in the back of your mind. Are we really doing this? Is it gonna take off? How did that play out in your mind?
We looked at different locations around town, and originally I thought, this building was too small. Just on paper, we looked at it, and then as we started looking at locations close to the McKinley exit, proximity to other breweries in town. C Street used to be, as we learned, one of the main avenues. Yellowstone Highway was the main thoroughfare, and on C Street there were plenty of businesses. There were gas stations. There was a dairy. So people used to get their milk delivered, from that dairy throughout Casper. So it's got a unique history, and we kind of refer to it as the warehouse district because there is a lot of industry down there. Even though people don't have storefronts, people have shops, people have manufacturing. There's some revitalization going on down there, so it's exciting just to be part of that.
Right. Take us back to home brewing, because a lot of people, before they start their business, they start doing it at home and making sure it works. And in this case, I'm sure you waited until it tasted good. So when did the home brewing start, and when did you know that this is ready for prime time?
So I had a buddy in Montana who homebrewed, and I was looking through the little classified ads one day, and my homebrewing career actually started with a broken down Range Rover because there was one listed for $500, and I called. And the lady says, "Oh, he already sold it." And we talked, and she says, "Yes, they came and picked it up this morning." And I recognized her voice. I said, "Is this Victoria?" And she said, "Yeah, I worked with her."
Right.
And she said, "Yeah, Peter was selling that, and he had it, and for some reason it wouldn't start." And I said, "Oh, bummer." And she goes, "But, he's got some home brewing stuff that it's in the garage, and he wants to sell that. He had bought a lodge up in Alaska, a fishing lodge, and his dream was to brew beer up there, and he never really used it." I said, "Well, what does he have?" And she goes, "I don't even know." So I went and looked at it, and it was 2 fermenters and a mash tun. And I called my buddy who homebrewed, and I said, hey, there's this stuff for sales. He goes, yeah, get it. He goes, I've got an old system I can sell you, and that'll be basically your setup. So during that conversation, my brother-in-law called, and I told him what I was doing, and he said, oh, yeah, we need to do this. So all of it became a me to we thing.
Right.
And I asked him if he would want to help and what have you, and he did. And the first batch we brewed, we did a 5-gallon batch of a brown ale, and it turned out good.
What year was that?
That would have been in 2012.
All right. Wow.
So we did that and got grain from my friend who provided me with the yeast, and I used his mill, and we did everything and kind of piecemealed things together. And we did a 5-gallon batch, and then the next batch we said, hey, if we add one more keg, we can double batch 10-gallon batches and do 20 gallons.
Right.
So I brewed one 5-gallon batch and immediately went to 20s, and then we were off to the races.
All right.
So that's what we did is incorporated that.
In 2012.
Yep.
So 10 years of backstory, 10 years of working until you went prime time.
Right.
So that's, yeah. And a lot of people don't realize that. They think overnight successes are just, overnight, but this is a 10-year overnight success.
Yeah, and it was fun. And I had my friend who, would kind of guide me and counsel me, and, I would ask him questions. And, the great thing about today is there's so many breweries out there. There are resources available. There's courses you can take, which I've done some of that. And there's just, if you have questions, there's ample places where you can get answers from.
Right. Was it a lot of trial and error during those 10 years?
It was. You learned the basics of managing your temperatures, sanitation, equipment, all of those things. And, some things turned out better, and you have some variations of grain that work better with different yeasts and hops. And, there's just thousands and thousands of opportunities and just possibilities to brew. So it's a lot of creativity goes into it.
Absolutely. That's what I like about craft beer more than just your classic, because there's a profile to it. There's a tasting profile. There's odors. There's different aromas. There's the taste, how long it lasts. There's a whole lot to it, and I think that we miss that in just classic all-American beers. And I love that about Casper.
And there's standards and characteristics, so style profiles, and what are the IBUs, and what's the color, and what's the the malt character. How do those things all play? So there's variations. So you've got some range to work with in there, and that's what makes people's IPAs different from one another, and so forth, because there's just so many variables that you can play with.
Right. Do you find that no two beers, even if you name it the same thing, are exactly the same? Or are you finding that you can get some consistency?
Oh, definitely. Between your grain bill, what grains you're putting in, the hops, your yeast, your temperatures, your timing, all of those things lend themselves to consistency, and that's essentially what the brewer is striving for in the commercial realm. In homebrewing, if you brew something that doesn't turn out, you can say, okay, we tried that and it didn't work. But when you brew a beer and present it to the public and people drink it, they come back in 4 months, they want that same beer. They remember it. So, I think any brewer that you talk to is really, really striving for that consistency, and they do that through controlling temperature, time, ingredients. All of those things go into play.
So do you think it took you 10 years to find that consistency, or that's just when you're ready, maybe financially, to launch out?
Yeah, I think, my beers, even initially, as a home brewer, started out, had a kegerator in my garage. I'd come home and, I'd have 3 friends parked in the driveway, all helped themselves, and they knew where the glasses were, and we'd hang out and so forth. So, I think anyone will tell you in the brewer's world, it's like grandma's spaghetti, right? You make it and you want it to be good, and you take pride in that. And when people do enjoy it and they say, hey, I really like this, that feeds your confidence and feeds your strive to do more and to do better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for watching today. These podcasts are powered by PayRock, and PayRock is a payment solutions provider. We work with any size business or nonprofit, improving those payment acceptance efficiencies while reducing those overall costs. You can get a hold of me through any one of those social media channels, or you can give me a call. Let's get back to that podcast. So what is your favorite beer, and what does it mean to you?
People ask me that, and I said it's kind of like your kids, right? Mm-hmm. On any given day, you've got a favorite. I can sit at the brewery and I can have say one of my stouts, and I can be drinking that, and then someone will come along and they'll drink my Piwo Grodziska, which is a Polish beer, traditional Polish beer. And I'll say, God, I haven't had a Piwo in a while. That looks really good. And then I'll drink that. So it all depends on the day, the temp, the mood, what other people are drinking. And it's kind of a hard choice to say, what's your, quote, favorite beer?
Got it.
Yeah.
So are all your beers named after Polish names or Polish people, or just a few of them?
No, I'm Polish-Irish. The Polish beer is just a unique beer. Most smoked beers are dark. The Pivo is a light wheat-based beer, 100% wheat. It has one Polish hop, so it's what they call a smash beer, single malt, single hop, single malt, and single hop. But our beers come from names. When I brew a beer, I start thinking about what I'm going to brew and come up with the recipe, and then you kind of noodle it, you brew it, it's in the tank, it's fermenting, you think about possible names. So all of our beers have some link to our families, to an experience, to a friend. For instance, I do a Hefeweizen that I call Yellow Helmet. Heidi grew up in North Dakota on a farm, had 3 brothers, and they were small grain farmers. They had a chicken operation. They had 10,000 laying hens. And with her 3 brothers on a farm, there's always stuff going on. So anytime things got crazy, like, I'm going to climb the windmill, they would say, you better wear the yellow helmet. And the yellow helmet was their dad's Skidoo helmet. All right. And Chad was like, I'm going to jump the ditch on the 3-wheeler. It's like, well, you better wear the yellow helmet. So Heidi enjoys Hefeweizens. I heard the story about the yellow helmet. Her brother Ryan had it on the mantle of his fireplace for years, and then for whatever reason, it fell out of ownership, and we don't know where it is. But we name it in honor of the yellow helmet.
You got to find the Holy Grail. And
yes,
find
the helmet. My Rose is Honey Rye. My Aunt Rosemary, her grandkids and kids called her Honey. So this beer is made with a honey roasted malt. So all of these things go into it. Tagged out oatmeal stout, I first brewed when it was hunting season. Quote, you're tagged out. My Cold Lizzie English, Cold English or Scottish ale was in the fermenter. It was fermenting. Queen Elizabeth died. I kegged it the next day, hence the name Cold Lizzie. So we always kind of come up with something related to an event, to a person, to some part of our family's history to kind of name it. Right. And that's fun. And what's also fun is people always come up, well, you should name a beer this, and you should name a beer that. And I'm going, well, when you own a brewery, you can name a beer whatever you want.
Exactly. And that's great that you bring your family culture, your family history into it, because it also preserves their stories as well. And that's something that we need to maintain in our families, is those stories from years gone by. So also, you're Poland and Ireland, or those are clearly both beer cultures as well. So bringing that into what you're doing here in Casper is unique as well.
Sure.
Yeah, those are definitely, when we think about Europe, those are 2 places you go for. Poland is also beer, but also vodka, because obviously they make vodka as well. Do you have any vodka tasting beers on tap?
No, not particularly. There's a variation our license allows for malted beverage, which is, a grain-based beverage that's malted. Doesn't allow for wines, doesn't allow for liquors, that sort of thing.
Right.
And vodka is, typically doesn't have a whole lot of taste.
It doesn't. unless they add flavors to it, and that changes it.
My grandpa Gleason used to make dandelion wine, and he'd boost the ABV by dumping a little vodka in there. So his wine was always pretty potent.
The moonshine. You emphasize field to glass.
Yes.
How important is sourcing those ingredients, and where do those ingredients come from to bring your products the uniqueness they have?
Right. So I grew up, I would say a farm kid. My grandfather farmed. Heidi on her side of the family, much larger North Dakota agricultural production, based in agriculture, farming small grains. Her dad was one of the first vendors who brought sunflowers to North Dakota. They had a laying hen operation. So on both of our families, we've always felt a connection to the land. In fact, when we were married, what we did is we took dirt from each of our family homesteads and combined them in a jar as part of our wedding ceremony, kind of a melding of the earth, if you will. So that was kind of important to both of us. We talked about growing up and being farm kids and how important that was. So when I started brewing, of course, home brewing, I'd buy my stuff wherever I could, beg, borrow, steal, get grain, get this, use variations, you'd have to substitute. And when we opened Stahoos, I started looking at different opportunities and learned about the world of craft malt, and reached out to Gallatin Valley Malting in Manhattan, Montana, just out of Bozeman, and talked to them, and was really inspired by the fact that this is a 4th-generation Dutch family that farmed there. They came originally as part of the Manhattan Malting Company in the 1850s. This fellow formed a company there, brought in a bunch of Dutchmen because they knew how to farm and irrigate. And ultimately, that malting plant closed down during Prohibition in 1919, but those families stayed. And one of those families is the De Jong family. And they're a fourth-generation family who farms. And in 2017, they started malting their own grain that they grew. So I reached out, talked to them, and they sent me some samples. And I was really impressed by the character, the flavor, the size of the grain, and their story. They said, we can tell you what field we grew it in. We can tell you who drove the combine. We can tell you when we malted it. Each bag is labeled, and each batch is then tested at Montana State University for moisture, for protein, for the color, and all of those parameters that go into the grain. So they're very, very quality oriented. And it just really made sense to work with them. And I call frequently, and we have conversations and ask what the new malts are and what they're working on, and it's really cool to see their business grow over the last 3 years that we've worked with them, and to see what's coming down the pike. They resurrected a malt that was first brought to Montana in 1905 and then quit growing in 1919. So they worked with Montana State University, and it took them several years to grow enough of this to have a seed base, and that's the base of our Heritage Pilsner. This malt was imported from Germany in 1905, and it won accolades, national competitions. It grew the best in Montana. They brought it to the United States, tested it in 6 different areas, and that's where it prospered. And that region of Montana is known as the Golden Triangle. It's a heavily, heavily agriculture-based area, notorious for great grain production. And, when 20 years ago, I remember the story, you could go and get a McDonald's hamburger, and there were, 400 cows and DNAs that they tested in it. So it's kind of a connection to that farm and to the tradition, to know that when I open a bag, that it's come from a batch that they've grown, and it's been made with great care and concern and a focus on providing a great product. And they're wonderful people to work with, and it's just kind of our theme, if you will. Goes back to our agricultural roots, and
Right.
It's just part of who we are.
I'm not sure you can trace back McDonald's food all the way back to to living organisms today, but maybe.
Right.
But that is interesting. How do you balance the traditional aspects of beer brewing, and also the new things that are coming out, like an oatmeal stout, or even the funky things that are going to happen this weekend for St. Patrick's Day,
Right.
and the different flavors that can seem very different. How do you balance all that?
For me, the balance is really to look at providing a quality product, not necessarily chasing the Holy Grail. In the nonprofit world, I was part of organizations, and the most successful organizations and the most successful businesses, in my opinion, are those that maintain their identity, their focus. In-N-Out doesn't serve chicken sandwiches, right? Coke tried New Coke, Old Coke, Coke Zero. And what's their top seller? Coke. And it can be sexy to chase whatever's new and exciting. And for nonprofits that I work for, I saw several of them. Well, we're going to do this, and what's your core mission? You look at that statement and go, how does that fit? Mm-hmm. So there's a thing that's known as mission creep in the nonprofit arena. So I focus on that, and then think, what do people enjoy? And I've gotten out there, for the first year and a half, I never did any fruity beers, right? But our fruit beers are based out of, malt, water, yeast, hops, and fruit puree. So it's pure ingredients, and so that's what we really focus on.
Got it. Definitely, that's where I lean, obviously, to the classical. I'm a stout or maybe a porter, but definitely not like funky flavors. So
Right.
I think I read I forget when I read this, but people go to certain restaurants or certain places because they trust that what they're going to get is going to be what they had the last time. Yeah. So that's why you can find McDonald's in the middle of Kenya, and when you're on a work trip, and you can go to McDonald's because you're going to eat what you eat back home in Casper. So it's like people do that on purpose. So I think people are stretching their limits of what beer should be, and I think that's not necessarily a bad thing, but also they want to come back to something that they know as well. Mm-hmm. So,
Good point.
What is it like to be in like the heart of the growing craft beer scene here in Casper? Because you're on C Street. There are, I think, two other breweries. There's Mountain Hops in the end. There's Ty's Skulltree, and then there's yours.
Right.
But I think there's 9 now total. 9.
Correct.
What's it like to be in the middle of that scene, the growing scene?
Right. So we were the 6th brewery that came to Casper, and not to give my age or anything, but going back many years when Sierra Nevada was kind of a local regional beer. We lived in Montana where the craft beer scene was really growing. Madison River Brewing, who Howard's a great friend of mine, he started off contract brewing and then he opened his own tap room. And, I think it took Montana blossomed very quick. I think it took Wyoming several years, a little bit behind. One of the reasons we located on C Street was to be part of that brewery row, if you will. The other 2 breweries are located on Burlington. You've got Oil City also within a mile and a half. So
right.
It's just part of that experience that all of us provide people. People come down and say, hey, we're brewery hopping. We're from Texas. We came in. We're staying in town, and we wanted to stop by. We saw you on the internet, and what other breweries can we go to? And we bounce people back and forth, and many times some of our patrons will come in and say, oh, I just saw those people down the street. So it's a community, and I think it's also made Casper a destination. Things like the Ale Trail have helped blossom and promote that. So people come to Casper, and it's a growing scene.
It is, and I think that people go to those particular breweries because of the specific taste they enjoy, but also they also will do multiple breweries because there's a variety that people enjoy as well. So I think Visit Casper is the one that put the Ale Trail together, and I think that's a unique aspect of tourism here in Casper. But going back to what craft beer is, I think that it's actually overall a positive thing. I think shifting from the American culture of saloons and bars and things like that, and doing something that's more family oriented, if that's possible, because there's a couple family focused breweries here in town. Yours being one of them. It's a couple other ones, but more than that, just focusing on the craft. Focusing on the flavor profile, and focusing more on the fact that the drink is just a means to an end. It's like, can we have a conversation? Can we talk about it? It's not about how many shots we can get down in 20 seconds or less. It's about, how is this enriching our city, our relationships? And that's what I think overall is a good thing about these. And I wish the success on all, 9, I believe there are 9. And not all of them have hit the 5-year mark, which is that famous, the infamous, 5 years in business. But I think that their uniqueness, the fact that they're focusing on craft and they're focusing on something different than, the saloon type environment is actually a very positive thing overall for our community.
Right, it is. And culturally, we have to look at, say, the last 40 years and the social aspect of drinking. And, people don't come to a brewery to, take advantage of a happy hour, well drinks for $1 and so forth. They come for the experience. They come, They want to meet the people who are brewing the beer. They want to have different tastes, different styles. And that's part of it. And at the same time, that's all great, from a safety perspective, from a public health perspective and everything. But it's a fine line. Mm-hmm. Sometimes a guy can't but help think, man, back in the day, guys would come in and sit and, spend more time. Now, people are just more mindful.
Yeah.
If you will.
For sure. And I think that the local laws help that. I know downtown, South David Street, the fact that David Street Station, that you can have open container rules are allowed during specific times and specific, times of the year. That helps to a certain extent. But obviously, we need to drink moderately and reasonably. And going back to seasonality, do you have anything seasonal that's coming this weekend for St. Patrick's Day?
Yes. Being the Irish Pollock that I am, we're going to celebrate on Monday.
Okay.
The actual holiday, if you will.
Makes sense.
I was Irish on my dad's side, Polish on my mom's, and growing up, I heard stories of life wasn't always easy for the Irish, and St. Patrick's Day isn't an opportunity or an excuse just to, throw food coloring in a beer and get hammered. It's about celebrating Irish tradition. And, my great-grandfather came over, and I've seen census information where he was listed as a teamster, not a union worker, but he drove a horse wagon.
Oh, wow.
And you go back and on the tradition, and my grandpa Gleason drove a beer truck in the 40s, and dug ditches and manual labor, and the Irish helped build the railroads and all of these things. And at the time, life wasn't easy for Irish Catholics in this country. There's a lot of persecution and things that happened. So that's what really elevated the St. Patrick's Day celebration, is to celebrate Irish pride. So we're going to do a corned beef cabbage dinner like my grandma Gleason used to cook. I got 100 pounds of corned beef, 50 pounds of cabbage, potatoes, and carrots, and we're going to start serving at noon. And we celebrate it on the day. We'll fly the Irish flag and
Nice.
do that. And this will be our third year doing it, and people look forward to it. So we're going to have fun.
That is good, and Ireland definitely has an interesting past when it comes to the persecution. Even unfortunately until today, if you look at Belfast, it's unfortunately not a resolved matter, and there's a lot to it. And I think if we limit sometimes, even like Cinco de Mayo, we think it's just another day to eat tacos or whatever. But there's history in that is not always positive, but it's important to remember.
Right.
It's very important to remember.
And on the Polish side, we celebrate Fat Tuesday by making punchkis, and it's a Polish donut. We've got a 100-year-old family recipe.
All right.
You get a punchki and a pint when you come to Stahoos. That's our third year doing that. And the first 2 years we did it, the weather was just incredibly bad, terrible snowstorms, and I'm going, man, people are risking life and limb for a donut. This is crazy, but it was fun.
One of your focal points is being family friendly. Yeah. What does that mean to you? Can kids come in? Can kids drink?
We provide we have sodas and waters, sometimes some Gatorades. A lot of times it's from my kids' personal stash, but we provide, we'll sell those to people. We've got a great opportunity for kids. Our building was last operated as a daycare before we bought it.
All right.
So when we bought it, there was a plastic play turtle out back. There's a pea gravel play area. You can see where the toys were strapped down. So we got great things. But little boys love to come and play in the pea gravel and kick it around and what have you. We got Tonka trucks out there so they can move some gravel and play in that. We've got games inside. And yeah, for me, it's and Heidi both, it's really important to provide that atmosphere for family. We got free popcorn. I had one family come in, they had like 7 kids, and they got like 3 bags of popcorn, and I watched them go over it, and they just poured it on the table. And it was like feeding dogs, right? These kids just came on, and I was just roaring. I go, that's amazing. Popcorn's flying all over and what have you. And they had, the kids had sodas, and mom and dad had a couple beers. And at the end, they went over and got the dustpan, cleaned it up, and what have you. And it was beautiful. Parenting's tough, and for mom and dad to get out and, if they can come and bring the kids, and the kids can be occupied playing in the gravel and playing a game, rolling dice, playing Jenga, whatever it might be, we're all for that. My kids come to the brewery, they help me, they work, and so forth. So far cry from when I was a kid, and Gramps would go to the bar, and you'd sit in the pickup truck, and he'd come out and feed you potato chips and grape pop. You'd go in and have a couple beers, and kids weren't allowed, and what have you. So,
right.
Just culturally, that's changed. So.
Right, and that's great. I like that. And there's other couple of the breweries that do that well, and do that as well. And I think that's great. It changes the focus of why we're there. Why are we going to a brewery? So what is your vision for the next 5 years? Do you have a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan?
We do, and one of the things that we really focus on, and I think it goes back to just the roots of agriculture, and Heidi's family was German, Norwegian. They farmed in North Dakota. My family, Irish, Polish, farmed and worked in factories in Michigan. Sustainability then wasn't a bumper sticker. Right, it was a way of life, and my grandpa grew chickens and had eggs, and when you went to see them, you'd come home with 6, 7, frozen chickens, and it was part of providing food and the celebration and producing. So we want to maintain for us sustainability of that family tradition of a small brewery that people can come to. It's us. We don't employ anybody right now. And I'm mindful of that. I'm very protective, if you will. So when somebody comes in and they want to talk about a beer, I can tell them what's in it versus, going someplace and somebody can ask about it. And I don't know, I just serve beer here.
Yeah.
So for us, the sustainability is to maintain that personal contact and the relationship with people in our customers, and we are going to grow. We're going to be doing some more distribution and locally, and just continue to focus on providing good beer and a great opportunity for people to come celebrate and have fun.
If you could tell the viewers one thing about your brewery that you'd like them to know that maybe they don't know about your brewery, what would that be?
Boy, where to start? I talked about the sustainability. Our beer is literally handcrafted. I monitor the temperatures manually. I adjust the heat with a valve. It's a very hands-on experience. I equate it to, my first vehicle was a 1974 Ford carbureted F-150, right? And if it didn't start, you'd stick a comb in the choke and turn it over, and it'd eventually go. So it's a very hands-on personal experience, and we want to provide that to our patrons and continue to do that through our beer that we continue to brew.
Well, Jim, thanks for joining us today. Where can we find you? Give us the exact location.
Okay, Stahoos is located at 1015 East C Street, which is on the corner of McKinley and C. And our hours are generally 3 to 9, with the exception of Thursdays. We're open from 11 to 9, and then Saturdays 1 to 9. And if you see my truck there, pop in. I'm always open to giving people tours, and some people are like, well, Mondays is my only day off, and I've had people come in and do that, and then they learn we have a fire pit and cornhole, and they hang out for the rest of the day. So.
Right. And Monday you're there at noon, right?
Monday I'm generally closed. That's
This Monday.
Yeah, Monday, yes. Yeah. This Monday for St. Patrick's Day, we'll be there at noon, serving till whenever people leave.
All right. And you have a website if you want to get more information about your backstory?
Yep, website. We're also on Instagram and on Facebook. Facebook, unfortunately, we were hacked. I can't respond to personal messages on there.
Okay.
It seems to be just this nebulous catch-22, but I can post on Instagram and then transfer it over to Facebook, but I can't necessarily monitor Facebook or respond to people. So.
Thanks, Mark Zuckerberg. So what's the website address?
It's www.stahoosbrewery.com.
Got it. Stahoosbrewery.com.
Yep.
Wonderful. Well, again, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
All right. Appreciate it.